Hey there guys, how's it going? The Reaper here, and in today's video I want to talk about why I believe pre-orders are bad for the video gaming industry, both on an individual consumer level, as in for yourself, it's going to be a detriment to you if you end up pre-ordering video games, and I want to talk about kind of the wider industry-wide connotations of why kind of pre-order culture is a negative thing for video games as a whole, as an industry. So kind of two different aspects I want to talk about, so I'm going to give a few different arguments, and then I'm going to kind of use a few different examples to back up my point, and hopefully I can bring a few people around to my way of thinking that I believe pre-ordering generally for both industry and industry-wide reasons and individual consumer reasons is overall a bad thing. So the first thing I want to talk about is the first, almost too obvious a reason why. When you pre-order a video game, you are paying for a product when you have no idea how well it's going to turn out. There have been countless occasions where loads of games get overhyped, they get really loads of buzz behind them, people are really excited, they pre-order a video game and it turns out to be absolute crap and there's nothing they can do about it because their money's already been gone. They've already paid for something, and regardless of how it turns out, their money's locked in. It might turn out to be okay, and they've played it as soon as it comes out, might turn out to be rubbish. Either way, the only guarantee is that your money is gone. Publishers love pre-orders for this reason. They love getting hold of people's money before the reviews come out, before any potential backlash comes out, before their game doesn't get reviewed or kind of accepted as well as they were hoping, or they're not expecting it to do that well, so they can get as many pre-orders as they can, get as much revenue and sales as they can, so even if the game doesn't perform as well after the game actually gets officially released, they've already got enough revenue built up that they can still make money, or they can account somewhat for the loss. So that's kind of the most obvious reason why pre-ordering video games is a bad idea. And the point I wanted to bring in this is kind of, I'm talking about the solo personal consumer aspect of this. You've got to think about why people pre-order video games. In the past, Steam, only existed for a certain amount of time now, and it's only been really major for a shorter time than that. There weren't as many platforms such as Steam, GOG, Green Man Gaming, where you could buy digital copies of games. So people used to pre-order games more often so they could have it on their desk or at home. As soon as they got home, it was posted through their letterbox because they pre-ordered it, so they could play it on day one of release. That's why more people used to pre-order video games. Now that Steam's come out and there are loads of digital markets you can download straight to your PC on, you can download it instantly, you don't have to wait for a delivery, you don't have to go out to the shops. You can play a game, you can just on a whim decide to buy a game on Steam, snap, I can download that game. People have got faster internet now, so people can, it's more easy for someone to download a game online, or maybe they could have had Steam, but they couldn't download a game because their internet, it would have taken so long, they'd rather buy a physical copy. It's much easier to download, at least for a PC game, and then play that. Xbox and PS4, it's not as much the case. I believe there are digital platforms and ways you can download games digitally for Xbox and PS4. However, I believe one of the issues there is hard drive space. A lot of the time people won't have massive hard drives on these consoles. The Xbox One, I think in a lot of cases the hard drive isn't actually that big, so you can't buy ridiculous numbers of games. You can't download loads of games, especially AAA titles. Games get larger and larger in memory space. It's not as easy on a digital level to get digital copies of Xbox and PS4 games. So there's still a kind of a system there where people tend to pre-order more to get immediate release copies, physical copies of games for consoles, whereas PC you've got more options of digital. So less people now tend to get physical copies either way. A lot of people still pre-order for the consoles, as I've said, less so for PC because it's easier with the Steam and other digital platforms. So basically, people used to pre-order more to make sure they got the release on day one. So they didn't have to wait until after the game came out. They could play it as soon as it was released. They would have it on their doorstep, ready to play. Now that's changed due to more digital purchasing and it being easy to buy via direct download. Things have changed somewhat. So companies are going to offer little sort of pre-order perks. I'm going to talk about this more in detail later, but basically you might get a slight discount as another incentive to try and pre-order. They might have 5-10% off, but they'll offer little kind of maybe little perks, little cosmetic perks. Say you're playing a single player game, I get this cool looking unique sword that you can only get if you pre-order or pay extra for it. You get this sort of little unique perk, little sort of incentive. And even though it's tangibly not that something that's that big, not that significant for the game, it's the psychology of it. If you think, if you pre-order now, you can get this extra thing, it's a consumer psychology of, if I don't pre-order, I'm missing out on something. I'm going to miss out on something that someone else gets. It's kind of a clever little piece of psychology. If you don't pre-order, you miss out on something. I don't want to miss out on something. I want to get everything that I can for my money. I want to get best value for money. I want to pre-order so I can get that little perk, that little cosmetic thing, just that little extra thing. It might tangibly be something very insignificant or next to make very little difference to the actual gameplay itself. But it just puts it in your mindset that people, I want that little extra thing. I want that thing. That's why people have another tendency to pre-order. So you have to stack it up as a risk-reward option. If you pre-order, yes, you get the game on day one. So if you wanted a physical copy, you can't get a digital copy, or you'd rather have a physical one, you can make sure with a pre-order you get it on day one. Also make sure you get the little extra perk. So that's what you're risking your money for with a pre-order. You've got to think of it as risk-reward. So when it does, say you get lucky with pre-order, say most of the time when you pre-order a game, maybe you've just been lucky, maybe you tend to pre-order games that you pre-order them because you believe they're going to do well. It's a developer that's got a good track record, a publisher that's got a good track record. You think it's probably going to turn out fine, I'll take the risk and I'll pre-order. Say 80% of the time when you pre-order a new game, it turns out as well as you were hoping. You get it on day one, so you don't have to wait around for the release, and you get whatever little cosmetic perk or an extra little bonus you get for pre-ordering the game. What about those 20% of times where it doesn't work? Say most people, when they pre-order, a lot of the time you're pre-ordering AAA titles, which are now up to about 50 quid sometimes. 40, 50 quid is probably about the average for a PC title. It's probably closer to 50 for PS4 and Xbox titles. You pre-order that game, even if you only a few of the games you end up pre-ordering end up being disappointing, that's still 40, 50 quid, maybe 60, $70. I don't know what the conversion rate is at the moment, or what the going rate for AAA games in America might be. But the full price for a AAA title, if the game you get turns out to be buggy as hell and you can't play it, or it's disappointing, or you thought you were misled, examples of which I'll show you a bit later on, you've lost out on all that money because you wanted to play it on absolute day one. As soon as I can physically play it, I don't want to have to wait a day to go to the shops. I don't want to have to wait around to download it. I want it on my door as soon as I get home from work on the day it's released. That's what you're risking a full price game for half the time. Even if it only doesn't work out a few times, maybe you say, I pre-ordered so I saved 2 quid. Okay, well, you pre-ordered and the game turned out to be shit, so you're down 40 quid. You are risking potentially quite a lot for a game that might turn out to be garbage, and there are plenty of examples, or even just disappointing, even more examples of that, for a tiny little incentive and to be able to play just on that day. If you could be patient enough to wait that one extra day, it takes very little time these days, as well as having more options of digital downloads. On the same day a game comes out, if the game comes out in the morning, I get home from work in the evening, there are going to be a plethora of reviews from critics. There's going to be a ton of community feedback. There's going to be people posting on forums everywhere. I could go on the Steam forums for a game that's just come out, and if there's loads of performance issues, people will be ranting and raving all over the front page on forums everywhere about the performance issues. It is very easy to get hold of this information now than it was, say, 10, 15 years ago. So you're risking a lot when you couldn't be, or you didn't want to take the risk of waiting an extra day or an extra evening even, going home, checking the reviews, checking the aggregates, checking the critic feedback as well as the user feedback, checking about performance issues and whether or not people actually thought it lived up to the hype. A lot of games do not live up to the hype, and so you're risking potentially quite a lot of money for a brand new AAA release that you've decided to pre-order because you wanted to play it as soon as it came out and you wanted that little extra perk because you thought, I'm going to lose out if I don't pre-order. That's why I think for individual level, that kind of mindset, it can be a problem and it can lead you to losing out on money for a game that turns out to be lackluster. So that's the first little point I wanted to make. You can lose out by pre-ordering yourself. You can lose a lot of money for not that big a reward if the game turns out well. Okay, so that makes my first point about kind of individual impact by pre-ordering on consumers. Now I want to talk about kind of the wider connotations of how it negatively affects the video game industry on kind of a wider basis. So I'm going to use a few different examples of AAA titles that were really hyped up, load of buzz, load of marketing. A lot of people went in wanting to play this game, and for whatever various reasons, performance, disappointment, whatever it may be, just ended up tanking. So when big AAA titles tank, but weirdly make quite a lot of money in revenue despite how poorly they were received. So a few different examples I want to go through here, just a kind of caveat. All the references I'm going to use here I'm going to post in the video description. If you want to refute any of those or if I've missed anything out, please let me know. And all the numbers, if I'm going to use numbers, according to these articles, if I'm using a review score which may change from day to day across a website because people can still go back and review it, the numbers for those were accurate at the time I made the video. So if there's anything you're concerned about or you think I may have got wrong or want to refute, please let me know. If I missed any link, please let me know. I'll try and post everything I've got in the video description. So I'm going to start off with kind of a obvious recent example of something that tanked. No Man's Sky. Loads of people were hyped for this. A lot of game companies had this on the kind of their top 10s of most anticipated games of 2016. When it released, it absolutely bombed. People felt they were misled. It wasn't what they wanted. It was just disappointing. It was bland. There was a huge player dropout. And it was one of the most negatively received games on Steam. The reviews from the users were absolutely horrendous. Currently, as it sits, this is even after the initial kind of negative backlash to No Man's Sky. Metacritic rating as of when I'm making this video, 61 average for the critic score and 2.5 for the user score. It may well have been lower than that, I won't say because I'm not sure. I only know what it says now. But 2.5 is a pretty low user score. Take it with a pinch of salt, Metacritic rankings. It's not a great tool to use for really accurate, precise readings, but it is good for giving you a general idea of how it was received both by critics and users. There's a few different reasons. You can find out online why they're not great for really precise calculations, but there are a good reason, a good way of getting kind of a good overall perception of how they were received both by critics and by users. So 2.5 for the user score. This is for the PC version as well. I'm using this for Steam recent reviews, 42% positive overall. 42% positive for recent, 32% overall according to the Steam store. According to an article by PlayStation Lifestyle, this is one of the highest selling console games of August 2016. In terms of revenue generated of the month of August 2016, which is when the game was released, it was the second highest grossing console game of that month and the sixth highest PC sales gross revenue of that month. Why do you believe a game that was so quickly ripped apart more by the users, but critics as well thought it was disappointing? Why do you think a game that tanked so quickly and had such a big player base drop out be the highest or one of the highest grossing games of the month of its release? People pre-ordered the game. A lot of people pre-order when there's a lot of buzz. Loads of people were set into this game thinking it was going to be great, and there was a massive backlash and a lot of people weren't happy with the final product. If those people had not have pre-ordered the game, they might not have been out of that money. Another example, a few years ago now, but it's kind of still fresh and very memorable in a lot of people's minds, is Aliens Colonial Marines. This thing got absolutely ripped apart by everyone. Current ranking on Metacritic, 45 critic, 3.5 user as of the time I'm making this video. But according to Eurogamer, by May 2013, it sold 1.31 million copies. Again, very high selling game. The game was critically panned, but I don't think it could be sold that it didn't sell very many copies. It sold over 1.3 million copies just by May 2013, in the year it was released. Again, same issue, people pre-ordering. Do you really think it would have sold that many copies if no one could pre-order the game? If there wasn't an option to pre-order the game, and that was a response, and people went, I'm going to buy the game, hang on a minute, go on the front of the Steam store, and those are the reviews. Do you really think it would have sold anywhere near that much? Third example I'm going to use, Rome Total War 2. Again, a few years old, but nice nice good example for that. Metacritic 76, user 4.2, so a little bit higher on the critic rating that time. Critics tend to be less critical of performance issues than kind of user scores. This was the biggest issue that came out with Rome Total War 2 was the performance problems. When it came out, it ran badly. People considered it a buggy mess. That's generally more of a problem that user reviews tend to attack than critic reviews. But it got ripped apart by quite a lot of people. Still sold well over 1 million copies. Again, arguably, according to a footnote, I did go on Wikipedia, but there was a footnote linking to an article which, unfortunately, I'll be honest, I can no longer access, suggested it had 6 times more pre-orders than Shogun 2 had. And it also says it was the most pre-ordered in Total War history. Now, that was probably right. That may not be accurate now that Total War Warhammer has come out, but when it came out, it was the most pre-ordered game in Total War history. And allegedly, according to that source, I'll link it below, or where I found the footnote, 6 times higher pre-orders than Shogun 2. That is a lot of pre-orders. Game got ripped apart by users, still sold loads of copies. In all three of these situations, people pre-ordering the game meant that these games actually sold not terribly, considering how badly they were received on a critical sense. So this is kind of what I want to talk about, the wider connotations of pre-ordering video games. It essentially allows companies to get away with making crap games. Aliens Colonial Marine selling over 1 million copies. No Man's Sky, despite getting ripped to pieces, made more revenue than all but one game on console of that month it was released. Total War Rome, over 1 million copies, 6 times more pre-orders. When people are pre-ordering these games, they essentially allow companies to get away with making subpar titles. It makes it easier for a company to get away with selling a disappointing title with not as much content as people were hoping they'd get, or a buggy title, or a poorly optimized game. It makes it easier for a company to shove out a game that isn't as good as it should be, isn't held to a standard it should be held to. Because even if everyone rips it apart, there's so much money they've generated already. They've essentially, as far as I'm concerned, got away with the practice of making such a disappointing game. If there was a situation where you couldn't pre-order video games, you'd be held to a lot higher standard, because they could not rely on releasing a subpar game and it generating enough revenue after all the reviews and all the feedback comes out, because it's so easy to get hold of so much feedback these days with how many internet aggregate sites, how many YouTubers there are that are quickly going to rip apart these games. They are reliant on the pre-orders. So the point about the industry is, if so many people pre-order a game, it just allows companies, it incentivizes releasing subpar titles and allows companies to get away with releasing disappointing titles. And if they can get away with it once, they can get away with it again. So this is my overall point about the industry thing. It encourages bad releases of games, and it allows them to not have to be released to the standard that we should be able to expect as a consumer base. If we're paying full price for a game, there should be a reasonable level of standard. And if your money's already locked in, regardless of how that game turns out, you cannot hold the people making that game to a reasonable standard, to a reasonable level of a game that works, a game that has what we believed it was promised and advertised to have. So that's my overall point about the industry. Okay, so the final point I want to make here is to kind of expand on what I was talking about earlier with the pre-order bonuses. So the point I was making earlier was from an individual consumer perspective. Generally, pre-order bonuses are little cosmetic items. They're nothing that significant that warrants you getting a pre-order. It's not worth the risk reward. You get a small reward for quite a large loss if the game turns out to be rubbish. However, there is kind of a more common trend now. I was talking about the incentives of pre-ordering games. So companies, now they don't have as many people buying physical copies, they need more incentives for people to pre-order. And what that has kind of created a culture of are more and more situations where pre-order bonuses are actually becoming content from the game, as in companies, especially publishers, big publishers, are cutting out content from a game and then chopping it as a pre-order bonus. A couple of examples. I'm going to try and find a clip of the Deus Ex Mankind Divided Augment Your Pre-Order, which was much lambasted, was ripped apart. Basically, it revolves around a system of the more people pre-ordered, the more pre-order bonuses were unlocked, but they didn't actually, at least what I could tell from according to the video, it was determined by a percentage number of pre-orders that if you got to a certain series of goals, the more things would be unlocked. So if enough people pre-ordered, it would unlock the second bonus. If enough people pre-ordered around the world, the third bonus would unlock, and the fourth and fifth. One of them originally was an in-game mission, so they'd designed a mission specifically for the pre-order bonuses, or cut a content out of the game to make for pre-order bonuses. There was extra content, extra little bits and pieces, and then they said if enough people pre-ordered, you'd hit tier 5, as they called it, of the pre-order, and everyone who pre-ordered got that game early. But part of the big thing was you're cutting content essentially out of the game and locking it off as a pre-order bonus, or then potentially charging money for it later down the line if you didn't want to pre-order, because that's a bit unreasonable. And they had a system where they didn't actually tell you how many people individually needed to pre-order. It was just a percentage of their imaginary goal, which no one knew what it was. So that was a much ripped apart sort of pre-order bonus. Another one, good example, is the Warhammer Total War pre-order, going back to the Total War games. Don't have a great track record of this, which was the system where approximately 6 months before the game was due to be launched, they announced the Warriors of Chaos DLC. Basically, there were 5 factions in the game, according to the Warhammer Games Workshop universe. Warriors of Chaos were one of these. They were described as a DLC, and if you pre-ordered the game, you would receive Warriors of Chaos for free if you pre-ordered on launch. So you would get 5 factions. If you didn't pre-order, you would only get 4 factions if you bought the game, and you would have to pay extra to get the quote-unquote DLC of Warriors of Chaos. So essentially, of the 5 factions that were in the game, one of them was cut out, And one of the major factions, according to the lore of the game, Warriors Chaos, for those who aren't familiar with Warhammer lore, are one of the more, probably the most significant evil, quote-unquote, factions of the game. They're kind of really integral to the overarching story. And they were essentially cut for a pre-order bonus. So if you didn't pre-order the game originally, they did change it eventually. I'll go on to this in a minute. You had to pre-order the game to play as Warriors of Chaos. Otherwise, you would have to pay extra because they decided it was a DLC. This was announced about 6 months before the game was due to launch. Again, this was ripped apart, and rightly so as well. So this is what is kind of created as a pre-order culture. Now, you could say at this point, well, hang on a minute. It's created a system, or we've now got a situation where there's actual content on offer if you pre-order the game. So this is surely a reason where I could pre-order, because there's actually a significant difference in examples I've given between the regular buying after the game is released and pre-ordering the game. However, this still creates a kind of more wider problem. Firstly, the problem I talked about earlier still exists. If you pre-order that game, yes, you get the extra bit of content that is given in the free order. However, that's extra content for a game that can still turn out to be crap. You're still taking the risk of, you don't know how good the game is going to be. If the game turns out to do well, you've got a bit more to win if you do pre-order, and it does turn out well. However, you'll get that extra content for a game that could potentially turn out to be crap. So you still got that initial problem as well. You've got content for a game, you have no idea how good it's going to be. And let's kind of run through the scenarios here. So say, for example, you pre-order a game where there's a lot of pre-order content, which you wouldn't get if you didn't pre-order. Either you would never get it, or you'd have to pay extra for it. Say you pre-order that game turns out badly. You've pre-ordered, you've locked your money in, you can't get it back, and you've got some extra content for a game that turns out to be crap, or maybe at the very least disappointing or buggy, and it could take a while before that game recovers and gets all the bugs fixed in a state that's considered reasonable and a playable level. Obviously, that's a loss in your situation if you do pre-order. Say you do pre-order and the game does turn out good, it was as good as you was hoping it to be, or maybe better. Maybe I'm being too pessimistic, the game turned out better than you were hoping it to be. So obviously you've pre-ordered, you've won because you've got that extra content for free, essentially because you pre-ordered, whereas others are going to have to pay for it. The problem is you've won in that situation as an individual. You may have lost if the game turned out badly. If the game turned out well, you may have done better off. However, a bunch of people have then been screwed over because they didn't pre-order, because they didn't want to take a risk giving money to a company for a product which they can't adequately decide whether or not it's going to be up to scratch. Now, I don't think it's really fair on them. I think it's not really fair for them to be screwed over because they were doing the cautious thing of not paying money for products with no idea with how it's going to turn out. The game did turn out well. They may want to play it, but now they're forced to pay extra for content that should have been included at launch. So you may have won individually, but for every person that wins in that situation who does pre-order, all the people that didn't then get screwed over. Another point I want to contend with as well, if a bunch of people do pre-order the game, they end up winning individually. However, what that's going to cause is the company's going to look at the situation and go, okay, well, that tactic worked. We got enough people to get pre-order the game, and those that didn't, because the game turned out okay, they ended up buying it anyway, and then a bunch of them paid extra for the content. There was a bit of a community backlash, but monetarily it's worked out in our favour. We got the pre-orders we wanted due to that, and then the people that didn't pre-order and then did buy the game, it also meant we generated extra revenue through that sale of that content, which people then wanted. What do you think they're going to do in that situation if that's what happens? If enough people pre-order, they're going to try it again. Other companies are going to try it. You're going to get the same situation where, again, okay, well, this happened once before, the game turned out okay, and a lot of people pre-ordered. The same company's going to try that again later down the line. Another company's going to try it. And every time you do that, it's going to take a risk on whether or not you're going to get the same situation where the game actually turned out okay. So this is just, if that situation works, it's just going to create more and more opportunities for it to not work. Maybe it worked out this time. It's not necessarily going to work out down the line, or by a game by a different company who's copying the same business tactic. It's going to create a situation where someone is going to get screwed over regardless of who does what. Someone is going to fail, and it's going to create dodgy business practices in the gaming community. It's going to mean more and more publishers are going to create annoying pre-order bonuses, and consumers are going to have to take the choice between take the risk of pre-order or decide to hold fast and then have to pay extra for content if the game turns out how they were hoping it would. Everyone loses in this situation. What you need to do is, when these sorts of things get announced, do what happened with Mankind Divided's pre-order, which that system I'm talking about was scrapped due to how badly the situation, due to the community backlash and how lambasted it was then scrapped. Total War Warhammer wasn't as big as change I was hoping. What ended up happening is they added a caveat where if you bought the game in the first week of release, you also got that DLC that they were setting aside for pre-orders. But that was announced after people started pre-ordering, so even then the people that did pre-order kind of got screwed anyway, because they were pre-ordering when they could have just not pre-ordered. If the game did turn out crap, it actually turned out quite well. It was quite critically well received. They then get screwed over because they could have waited. If the game had turned out badly, they could have waited up to a week after the game's released to buy it, after the reviews had come out and the feedback had come out, to buy the game and then got the content. It was still annoying that content was a DLC. I think it still should have been part of the game. I'm annoyed that they cut it out. But there was a caveat, and it did allow people to see how the game was and get all of the game, regardless of whether or not they pre-ordered, so long as they bought within the first week. That was due to a massive backlash. The YouTube announcement video was ripped to pieces, and again, the company decided to do something about it. The way you make good change here is by not pre-ordering games. Say to companies, essentially voting with your wallet, we're not going to pre-order. We're not going to get you pre-order bonuses. If there's a really stupid pre-order bonus that takes out loads of content, make a big song and dance about it. Do make a fuss, do kick off, and then go, right, what we want is for you to say what this game's going to be, release the game. If it holds up to snuff, we'll pay full price for it. If you make a song and dance about it, the two examples I've given evidences the fact that a company will change its mind if they think that monetarily, not for the goodness of their own heart, monetarily it's going to work out as a negative for them. Don't get enough people to not pre-order, create enough buzz around the community, talk about it on forums, Twitter, social media, spread the word, get people to complain about it, get them to dislike the company's videos, get them to complain on the forums. Things will change. Pre-ordering video games, for the examples I've given, I would argue, creates several negatives and will overall negatively affect the industry, both for individuals and as a more widely for kind of the gaming group. So that's basically all the points I wanted to make. Thank you for listening to my bit of a rant and ramble. Hopefully it was coherent. One thing I do want to finish this video off by saying, normally I would have started with this, is I did not want to intend this video to be a finger-pointing exercise. I did not create this to try and point fingers at people that pre-order. I've pre-ordered games. I've done it in the past because I've wanted this stuff. I'm as guilty of it as any man or woman out there. I'm just trying to get people to kind of think about this in a certain way and give a few examples as to why we can make video games better for everyone. This is not an exercise of you're ruining it for everyone. Not everyone's as lucky as me. They might not have the same amount of time. They might not be aware of these issues. They might not be as big into video games as some people. I have a YouTube channel. I'm big into video games. Or they might be aware, but they might not have much time and say, look, I don't have that much time. I don't have that much money. I like video games. I understand the points you're making, but I want to be able to play my game. I understand the points. I'm not happy about it, but I want to be able to play the game I've been looking forward to playing for a year. And that's understandable. I've got no problem with that. I'm lucky than most people in that regard. So if anyone feels they're being attacked because they pre-order games or because they have pre-order games, I apologise. That's not what I'm intending. I'm purely intending this as hopefully to educate and enlighten people. If you want to disagree with me, that's absolutely fine as well. I'm absolutely happy with people disagreeing with me. Don't just be a dick about it. But if you want to make any counter arguments, by all means, leave them below in the comments. Make a video response with your own counter arguments, about own evidence in cases where you might have your own point and you can counter against mine. By all means, let's have an honest discussion about this. All I wanted to do here was not point fingers, not place blame, not us to have gamers ripping each other apart for doing things. All I wanted to do was try and create a bit of buzz and try and educate people maybe not aware or haven't heard this argument before. So thank you very much for watching. It went on a little bit longer than I thought it would. If you want to make any feedback, any comments, any questions, please leave down below. I'll respond to them if I can. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. My name is The Reaper. Thank you and good night.